Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much for publishing this difficult little book so quickly. And thank you to my fellow readers tonight for your words. I do indeed have an experimental opera, which is premiering at the Royal Opera House in London on Sunday. And if you're not bored listening to me after this reading, I'll pop a little link in the chat if you happen to be in London and you want to come. So I'm going to read, there are 3 essays in the book. They're quite short, they're quite discreet. And I'm going to read the middle essay, an annotated version of it, called Why I Write, the Way I Write, and in brackets, Sally. All I did was watch TV. I'm not sure how I came to writing. I didn't read books when I was growing up. I was not bookish. When I peruse interviews with other writers, they often cite their joy of reading, their pleasure in getting lost in the complete universe of a text. I was busy watching gory horror films, ultra-violent video nasties, and soft porn. I enjoyed getting lost in these because the extreme happenings in them came to an end, whereas the extreme happenings in my everyday life in working class Belfast during the very worst of the Troubles were cyclical and brutalising. By the way, if you're wondering how I was able to watch gory horror films, ultra-violent video nasties, and soft porn on TV since I can remember, it's because basically I didn't have any parental guidance or supervision. All I did was watch TV, sitting up by myself watching them as often as they were on, while everybody else, there were 6 of us in the tiny terraced house and I was by far the youngest, was in bed. All I can say about that to you is that aggressively militarised environment of civil unrest does funny things to adults. So back to this question of coming to writing. Whilst I think I feel writing is an intrinsic part of my identity, and it's taken me ages to realise this despite having been a writer for quite a long time, I've always been sure that being from Belfast definitely is. I am totally sodden with the city's words. I was surrounded by plenty of these, understanding their immense power in a shy, inchoate way. For example, there are always plenty of words written on walls in English and in Irish. But mainly my relationship with the power of words was predicated on keeping your mouth shut, pretending you didn't know something at school, not talking over the turned up volume on the TV, and never ever stating a preference of any sort or asking anybody for anything. Now, here's something you probably don't know. You might well find it interesting. When you're inside your house and there's a riot or yet another terrifying and thrilling peak of civil unrest is happening outside, you experience it through sound. You stay well clear of windows for at least 2 good reasons. Firstly, you don't want to be seen witnessing anything. And secondly, you're hiding behind a wall that's furthest back in the house so that if a bullet or a Saracen or a hijacked bus smashes through the front window, it won't hit you directly. Because houses in bad areas are poorly made, the walls are very thin. Even the one at the back you're hiding behind. You hear nearly everything, and each sound you hear has a diacritical relationship to the others. You are learning. I hardly never went out except to school until I became a truant, because all I did was watch TV. When I made my first confession, as all 7-year-old Catholics across Northern Ireland did, I'd nothing to confess, so naturally I lied. I'm sure this was not uncommon, but I didn't know this at the time and certainly would not have admitted to any of my classmates that I lied in confession. I told the priest that I said bad words inside to myself. I did not need to explain to the priest what bad words were, but for the avoidance of doubt here, when I say bad words when I was 7, I meant cunt, fuck, and oddly, turd. I can't remember what penance the priest gave me, but I do remember being surprised that he wasn't surprised I said bad words, and I was thankful for that. Now, 4 very important words. In Belfast during the Troubles, British soldiers were known as the Brits and the Royal Ulster Constabulary were known as the Peelers, thereby corralling 2 heavily armed, aggressive, and in retrospect probably terrified security forces into manageable, definite articles. Like all families in our bad area, we bought Anfable, a Republican newspaper which was sold door to door. And after a quick read through, because if a particular neighbour happened to ask you a question about Aunt Fubla's contents, you needed to have some sort of an answer, we burnt it on the open fire in our living room. Burn after reading. We did this in case the Brits, when they were raiding our house, as they did at least once a week, usually on a Saturday morning when Swap Shop was on the TV, so we had a copy, they would associate this with being a Republican and would therefore punish us. That's what we thought would happen anyway. It happened to other families in our street and surrounding streets all the time. And let me tell you, it's astonishing how immense the material volume of a small terraced house expands when the interior is ripped apart and dumped on the street. So to the point of this essay, my respect to the power of words, well, I blame my mother, Sally. She had the most refined and deadly palette of insults I've ever heard. Most are too serious, too personal for inclusion here, but I'll share here with you my very favourite, which is stick your nose up my hole. For those of you who may not be au fait with what hole means, it means arsehole or asshole if you happen to be listening to this in North America. Recently, I heard on the radio that vultures wait until the carcasses they want to eat reach a highly advanced state of decay, then work their way in through the dead animal's hole as an easy route to the soft insides. I'm also remembering reading an historical account of a Catholic soldier who, on the cusp of being executed by firing squad, requested to be shot in the hole so that his body would remain intact and he would not be denied access to heaven because he was incomplete. It was well known, even to me when I was growing up, that prisoners, including those who were our neighbours, smuggled various sorts of goods, including, amazingly, a tiny radio, up their holes, a poetic process named bangling. All three of these examples strike me as good uses for a hole. Of course, I can think of others, as I'm sure you probably can too. Figuratively, stick your nose up my hole is a kinetically sophisticated and perversely sensual. It demands a lyrical form of surrender, of disciplinary sublimation, through the abrasive enactment of a complicated and highly specific sort of metaphysical positioning to carry it out. It assumes obedience and therefore presupposes consent. It is almost jargon. It's important to remember, to visualize even, when one sticks something into something that is gooey, gummy, moist, let's say a hole, for example, the chances are the thing that has been stuck in, let's say a nose, for example, will be smeared with residue upon removal. Accordingly, Sally's words adhered, her insult has legacy. I am not sure, and to be honest, I've no way of ever finding out if anybody did in fact ever stick their nose up Sally's hole. This further leads me to wonder now if I would like someone to stick their nose up my hole. I think I might give it a go after finishing reading this out. Obviously, neither of those two ponderances are the point here. The point is Sally's atavistic demand for degradation, for subservience through baroque biological configuration, for power. The point is that a working class woman of her generation like Sally was indeed almost completely powerless. Sally used to refer to herself in the third person present tense. For example, Sally takes herself up the shops, positioning herself with persuasive immediacy as the main character in her own life. And because Sally was using the third person present tense, the affect was one of a omniscient narrator who confidently penetrates all characters in her directional panorama, thereby a certain comprehension and control on her part. I wasn't the only one who watched a lot of TV. She was assembling herself through a combative miasma of actions and characteristics, which from a distance lent her sovereignty. This is what I think she thought, the bit about sovereignty, I mean, not what I thought. I always thought she was dissembling. And actually, when you look at it, Sally referring to herself in the third person is not dissimilar to 7-year-old me watching gory horror films, ultraviolent video nasties and soft porn on TV. We're both trying to find a point of resolution. For a sizable portion of my life, I believe Sally was unique in the privation and anguish she experienced as a working class woman. I believe this because Sally encouraged it, well, to be honest, indoctrinated it into me. I also believed because I'd never met anyone in my adult working life whose mother or father had led the life that Sally had. I still haven't. I've worked with people who have said they're working class but went away on holidays once a year, ate out in restaurants on their birthdays, owned a car, got more than one Christmas present, and even one person whose parents had had a cleaner. My mother cleaned hospitals for a meagre living. Working class people can barely afford cleaning products, let alone cleaners. And in all good faith, I can't say that these people were not working class, but they were not my kind of working class. I continue to carry the melancholia and implication of the rubbishness of Sally's life, even though I now know her experience was quite average for thousands, millions of women of her social standing. The harm these women endured lowered them in their own eyes. Whilst shame is both a noun and a verb, collective shame is servitude. The only thing marking out Sally's experience from millions of other working class women is that she lived through the Troubles. Hence her carrying a dismembered head into the house and putting it into the bath with a frozen Christmas turkey to keep the head fresh because the peelers wouldn't let an ambulance through. One of many, many gruesome vignettes. And no, the turkey didn't get eaten despite being sealed in plastic because Sally was very particular about food hygiene. She threw it out. The waste nearly killed her. Sally had her tarnished and tiring life, a tourniquet of poverty and war, but I like to think she had at least her words. When I was writing this essay, it had a different ending, an ending where Sally was still alive, 88 years old, slowly starving herself in a residential care home in North Belfast, having somehow survived COVID in a place where 2/3 of the residents had died of it. During the 4 years Sally lived in the home, she mostly enjoyed the company of the other women there, unaware that nearly all the women were middle class and Protestant. She might well have felt differently about them if she had known that. And the reason why I wrote about Sally in the past tense, even though she wasn't yet dead, was because I thought she'd already lost the use of her skillfully obscene and devastatingly contemptuous words because she was uprooted out of place. Her words had no target. By this, I mean, for example, she no longer needed to protect her heavily pregnant body and the soft-skulled mass within from being prodded by Brits with rifles while spread-eagled against a yard wall for hours in bitter Belfast December weather. What would you do in her shoes not to show weakness? And in case you're wondering, yes, of course, I was the wet body inside Sally's body. I've deliberately chosen not to employ any references here because I didn't want to shortcut with the words of others. But there is one quotation I want to give you from St. Augustine's Confessions, which is, "You are so high among the highest. I am low among the lowest, a mean thing. You never go away from us, yet we have difficulty in returning to you." These words are the closest, most direct address to the condition of being from a poor working class Belfast background that I can offer you. And I do love these words, but not as much as stick your nose up my hole. Thank you.